The stupidest people in America work for Donald Trump's administration. That's not an exaggeration, and it's not mean, it's just true. And even Donald Trump is waking up to it at this point, because after Kristi Noem went on Meet the Press this morning and admitted to her own criminality in the Trump administration, of course, our petulant child, panicked president, took to Truth Social to melt down and try to save himself in a complete collapse that we are going to get into. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button, because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we get into the meltdown from Noem and the crazy post from Trump, I want to start with someone who is calling both of them out, and that is Jasmine Crockett, putting a dagger in Trump's immigration agenda.
I think he is trying to do what he's always done, which is instill fear. He wants people to go into the shadows. He wants people to hide out the way that they're doing right now. People are not sending their kids to school. They're not showing up to work. He is wanting people to be terrified, and he only wants his kind of people on the streets. He wants everyone else to kind of languish in the shadows. But we can start with the fact that he's married a couple of immigrants himself, and we can start there if we about to start denaturalizing. I'm just saying. I just want to be clear. This is the party that says that, they care so much about life until life actually shows up at their front door. And this is also the party that supposedly is about Christianity. And I just imagine what they would have done to a little baby Jesus. But that's a whole other issue. It is really so heartbreaking. We know that under the prior Trump administration, it was the children in cages. So for me, expecting them to do better by children was not one of the things that was on my bingo card. I never expected them to do better. I expected them to do worse. And frankly, that is what they have done with this entire administration, is they have made everything worse. Like, it was bad the first time, so bad that he got kicked out of office. And then, unfortunately, America got amnesia, and somehow he ended up back in office. And now he is literally terrorizing everyone, from children that are born in this country to children that aren't born in this country to adults. It is really sickening. And if we are really going to get back to where we are truly great in this country, it is going to take really looking at your neighbors and seeing their humanity. He was able to dehumanize people during the election, whether it was trans folk or whether it was the immigrant. He dehumanized. And if you study anything about the Nazis, that is where it all starts, is the dehumanization. And none of us should be sitting by, even if we're not trans, even if we're not an immigrant. You have to understand that the dehumanization will come in for black folk. It will come in for women. It will come in for everyone. And that is why we unfortunately got here.
The cruelty is the point for Donald Trump. We know that. We knew that when Russ Vought said, as part of Project 2025, that he wanted to traumatize federal workers. But it's not just federal workers. Donald Trump wants to fundamentally change our perspective on how the government works. Not for expanding public goods and making sure that people are fed, housed, and taken care of when they're sick. But no. It's for billionaires to make even more billions and to hurt the rest of us. That's what Donald Trump wants you to think. It's just not true, though. Donald Trump and his administration are still bound by the laws, even though he wants you to believe that he is an unchecked dictator. And one of the laws that they're bound by, Kristi Noem admitted to breaking on air, and it's why Trump had to melt down in a post.
Secretary Noem, let me turn to my final topic. In a filing in federal court this week, the Justice Department said that when the administration was ordered back in March to stop sending detained migrants to a mega prison in El Salvador, you personally made the final call to continue the flights anyway. Is that correct? Do you acknowledge that?
We have court filings going on and decisions that are going forward. I'll let them continue to play through that process.
But did you make that call?
I'm proud of President Trump and his leadership and the decisions that we have made. And the decisions that are made on deportations, where flights go and when they go, are my decision at the Department of Homeland Security. And we will continue to do the right thing and ensure that dangerous criminals are removed.
So that you're saying that it was your decision. It sounds like the judge wanted to ensure that people were given due process. He said very clearly, quote, any plane containing these folks that is going to take off or is in the air needs to be returned to the United States. But those people need to be returned to the United States. However that's accomplished, I leave to you. But this is something that you need to make sure is complied with immediately. Did you defy the court's order, Madam Secretary?
No, Kristen, and that's one of the things that we continue to face across this country is activist judges.
And after that disaster interview with Noem, Tim Miller of The Bulwark responded by saying, "See you in court, Secretary." Tim is right. They're admitting to crimes openly, whether they understand that or not, because they're stupid or they don't care. It doesn't matter. They're admitting to the crimes. And Donald Trump realizing this is what's happening and also realizing that the tide has turned on immigration. I saw a Republican strategist say this the other day, that this is the first time that Donald Trump's immigration positions have been a net negative for him. The first time in his political career, which is crazy to think about. But that's how bad things are for Trump, which is why he immediately took to Truth Social and said this. Trump wrote on Truth Social, "Crooked Joe Biden, Mayorkas, and so-called border czar Kamala Harris really screwed our country by letting anyone and everyone come in totally unchecked and unvetted." Of course, Donald Trump is trying to ramp up the racism, scare people, fearmonger, thinking that will save his crashing poll numbers, but it's just not the case, because not only is Donald Trump addressing an immigration agenda that's failing, but he is trying to claim that the alleged assailant in the shooting of 2 National Guardsmen last week, earlier this week I should say, was the fault of Joe Biden, that it was Biden, but as Kristi Noem was confronted with in this interview, it was actually someone granted asylum under the Trump administration in April. So I don't really know what Trump expects to get out of this posting tirade. Kristi Noem admitted you broke the law. Kristi Noem couldn't spin the fact that you granted this alleged assailant asylum. So what do you have to say, Donald? Not a lot, except for the fact that you're freaked out and panicked, and you should be, because the consequences are coming. As someone who is making that very clear is Senator Chris Van Hollen, who didn't just call out Trump, called out Kristi Noem as well in this interview right here.
This is a desperate attempt of the Trump administration to blame everybody else in the world and not accept any accountability. As you pointed out in your interview with the secretary, it was the Trump administration that was last in time when it came to vetting. And I can tell you that they come before Capitol Hill, Secretary of Homeland Security, FBI director, and they tell us how they've improved the vetting processes. And now they're trying to blame everything on the Biden administration. This is a president who refuses to take accountability for anything.
It was also interesting that she said that he was radicalized here in the United States. So how do you vet if the radicalization happens here, it didn't happen in Afghanistan?
Well, that's a very good point. And she talked about, not talking with foreign governments. Of course, this is a person who worked with the CIA
for years.
For years. So the reality is that we really don't know what motivated him to take this particular act. We should, of course, always review our vetting procedures, but it's not clear, based on their own vetting, that you could have picked something up in this case.
You were a big advocate. I mean, a lot of people were, both parties, for bringing the Afghan citizens who worked with the United States during the War on Terror to the United States once the Taliban took over. Do you now have concerns that this might not have been a one-off, that there have been gaps in vetting and that there could be, more problems?
Well, we should always review our vetting, but in this case, there's no evidence that there was something that escaped the vetting. As you just said, as the secretary indicated, he might have been radicalized here. If that's the case, again, the most recent in-time vetting was by the Trump administration. But, John, I do think it is outrageous and unfair to try to punish an entire class of people for the evil acts of one person. That is collective punishment. These are individuals who worked side by side with America in the fight against the Taliban. And if they were sent back now, the Taliban may likely kill them.
Might execute them.
So
and Maryland is among the top 10 states in the country.
That's right. That's right.
With these Afghan citizens,
Yeah. I think this is just a desperate attempt by the Trump administration to blame others. And I will say, John, I think it's important to remember that General John Kelly told us that President Trump told him that Trump had thought that members of our military were suckers and losers. And I see the president's mindset toward our National Guard and military, suggesting that they're political pawns of his and that they owe allegiance to him and not to the Constitution of the United States.
So let me ask you about that Washington Post report on the attack on that Venezuelan alleged drug boat. What do you make of what happened there? Do you think there was a war crime committed?
Oh, I think it's very possible there was a war crime committed. Of course, for it to be a war crime, you have to accept the Trump administration's whole construct here.
That we're at war.
Which is we're in armed conflict at war with the drug gangs. Of course, they've never presented the public with the information they've got here. But it could be worse than that, right? If that theory is wrong, then it's plain murder.
The first strike is murder in that case.
That's correct.
You're alleging.
That's correct. Well, I'm saying that it's either murder from the first strike if their whole theory is wrong, and I think the weight of the legal opinion here is that they've concocted this ridiculous legal theory. But even if you accept their legal theory, that it is a war crime, and so I do believe that the Secretary of Defense should be held accountable for giving those kind of orders.
And this is happening as, of course, you have the Secretary of Defense also saying that he wants to bring Senator Mark Kelly back to active duty to put him before a court-martial for telling members of the military they shouldn't follow illegal orders. Let me ask you, if that happens, Senator Kelly's one of your colleagues, how will the Senate respond?
Well, the Senate would be in uproar because this would be a blatantly illegal act and another example of the president's abuse of power. The six that the president is talking about are people who served our country, unlike the president who decided not to go based on a bone spur, apparently.
There needs to be accountability. Any Democrat who is not pushing for that is getting in our own way of preempting the rest of this administration. If Donald Trump and Republicans and his cabinet who believed for so long that they could get away with anything, realize that actual accountability is coming, not Merrick Garland pretend accountability, fearing that doing the right thing and prosecuting the crimes of Republicans was politicization. It wasn't. But if they understand that there is actual accountability for when they break the law, if we make it clear that there are investigations coming and that there will be punishments, and Stephen Miller, we're reopening Alligator Alcatraz for you. You loved it so much, you made merch. I hope you find yourself a nice cell. But if they understand that, it will be the beginning of the end much sooner than just the midterms or just sooner than 2028. And I think we need to make that clear. As the Republican Party is eating itself alive, I think we should help expedite that process. Republicans in Congress are already concerned with their own political well-being rather than serving Donald Trump at all costs. So how about we give them a little incentive to maybe escalate things a little more? We are certainly going to be talking about that on this show every single day. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.